that the Shannon's form is on where Sarah is, so there's
Okay,
the same
let's flip
form,
around.
but the names are.
Okay. We're ready to start, Bob. I didn't think I had to hit it that hard, but
Doing dollars for scholars stuff.
school work anyway. It's a little after 5:15. I'd like to call this regular meeting to order and welcome everybody in the audience tonight. Would you please stand and recite the pledge with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to school board norms. Heidi?
Thank you, Roger. The board developed norms are to share and respect varied opinions and speak with a united voice once a decision has been reached. To prudently prioritize resources in a student-centric manner that aligns with the district's strategic plan. To exhibit a mindset of continuous improvement through adequate preparation for meetings and a commitment to board education. To commit to assessing board effectiveness to ensure high-quality governance for the staff, students, and community of Jamestown.
Thank you. Moving on to public communication. Nita Tweeden, you'd like to come forward and just announce your name and where you're from. And
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing us the chance to speak. My name is Annetta Tweeten. I live here in Jamestown. I have 2 daughters at the high school and 1 at the middle school. I would like to basically choose to address tonight some of the decision making in regards to homecoming. We have some concern considering the lack of leadership and direction regarding the implementation of the educational plan and the rollout and the activities thereof. When we first learned we would be doing a hybrid schedule, I asked a couple of teachers how parents could help. I knew this schedule would be extremely taxing on the teachers. I knew that one responded that they had no idea how parents could be utilized. The other came up with a potential plan, but then realized additional parents and people would just simply not be allowed in the building. I am very concerned about the burden that is on the teachers and the staff of our school district. I am also concerned about the burden that is being put on our kids. Every week something changes, as we knew it potentially could with the decisions that are out of our hands. But the governor has allowed each school district to make their own decisions, and that's why I'm speaking here tonight. My daughter is a member of the senior class and on student council. They were informed only last week by members of the administration that there would be no traditional homecoming. They were told they could choose between nothing or to combine homecoming with Snow Week in February. So they felt they had to vote for something. Now admins are saying that student council wanted this all along. No pep rally, no homecoming court, no parade, no marching band, no Hall of Fame, just football. And only parents of the players can attend the game. My concern is not just one aspect of homecoming. My concern is the eliminating of all the events and activities. 2 Spirit Days does not make a homecoming. When this came to light, questions were asked and the blame game started. I am assuming that the administration is simply trying to enforce their interpretation of the school board's directives, which is why I'm asking the board to open up homecoming for the sake of our kids' emotional health and for the sake of our community. Why was the community not informed of this change? Why have parents in the student body not been let in to give feedback and to help? We are more than willing to help if we are asked. I know I'm not the only parent who is willing to participate in anything that I can do to make the staff and the teachers' burdens lighter and to help kids make lifelong memories. Please don't count us out. Don't make assumptions. Please do not delay decisions until no options are available. If people do not feel comfortable participating, then they can choose not to participate. But if there's no event at all, then that choice is taken from them. Thank you.
thank you. Shannon?
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Shannon Hagan. I'm a mom to 7, 6 of whom are still in the school district. 1 has graduated. I have 3 at Lincoln Elementary and 3 in the high school. And I'm here, or I'm also a nurse. And I'm just here, as a nurse, it's my job to be an advocate for my patients. And so I'm here as an advocate for my kids, for all of our kids. And the best quote that I've seen since this whole thing started was something along the lines of, if you want to ascertain the science on a given policy, you need to look at the literature on the subject before it became a political tool for social control. And I really encourage you all to keep that in your thoughts and right at the forefront when we are making these decisions and making these policies, because they're affecting our kids. Our kids are hurting right now terribly. So with that quote, COVID is real. It absolutely is real. But it's been 7 months now. We know that it mainly affects the elderly and those with severe comorbidities. Kids aren't dying. They're not being hospitalized. Teachers aren't dying and being hospitalized. Certainly not at alarming rates. I'm not saying nobody is, obviously. Just one statistic I want to throw out there, because this took me a really long time to find last week. According to the CDC, I looked up the total deaths in North Dakota from March 16th of 2019 to August 31st of 2019. The total deaths from all causes in that time period was 3,505 deaths. In 2020, March 14th of 2020 to August 29th of 2020, the same week time period, North Dakota has seen 3,371 total deaths. We are down 136 deaths than 2019. And yet we're making these policies and craziness. I mean, we need to look at all of the information here. How is this affecting our kids? Depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, huge. I don't know if any of you have tuned into the Grand Forks City Council meeting last week and listened to Dr. Gullick speak and give her testimony on what she's seeing in kids. She had an 8-year-old be successful at committing suicide because she was so afraid and living in fear of COVID-19. I mean, if you haven't seen it, I highly encourage all of you to watch it. Our kids are depressed. They are anxious. They don't know what to do, what to think. All this constant 24-hour media doesn't help anybody. The CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, all of the experts agree our kids need to be in school. We are doing more harm to them by not having them in school. The CDC has put out information that suicide, drug overdose, all of those things are at an all-time high right now in high school students. Hybrid learning is not working. It's not working. My kids are not learning anything. They are 90-minute class periods is absolutely too long. It would be too long for us to sit and listen to somebody speak for 90 minutes. We can't do it. You're tuning out after about 40 minutes. They aren't learning. They're stressed. They're struggling with schoology, everything that's going on. I work at the hospital. We have these conversations at work every day. All of the parents are like, oh, we just, they're struggling with this, they're struggling with that. It's not working. The science and the data do not support hybrid learning. These kids should be in school. All of the schools around us are here 5 days a week, and they're doing well. Their kids are thriving. They're having events. They're having homecoming. They're thriving. We have big schools that are in school 5 days a week. Minot, Dickinson, Grand Forks, 5 days a week. So many people agree with what I'm saying. I mean, as far as the kids being in school, it's like I said, it's a conversation we have daily. Teachers agree, the teachers I've spoken to. People are afraid to speak out. They're afraid of repercussions at their job. They're afraid of backlash from their fellow coworkers, teachers, what have you. And it shouldn't be that. We should be able to have these conversations. Parents should be welcome to these meetings, and we should be able to give our opinion and talk about what is affecting our kids. And it's not happening, or people are feeling like they can't do that. We should be able to have adult, intelligent conversations and come to a conclusion together on what is best for all of the kids. Activities. The kids can play football, they can run into each other, sweat, spit, yell at each other, not a problem. You should probably share the same water bottle, that's okay. But we can't have band and choir, orchestra concerts, because certainly we're going to spread COVID if we do that. These policies don't make sense. There is no consistency to any of it. It is, again, you can share the same basketball, football, whatever, slap it around, but you can't say good game, and give high fives on the way out. You've all touched the same ball. You're sweating all over each other the whole game. And we're taking that away. We're taking that sportsmanship away. Our kids can't cheer on their fellow classmates. They can't be there, like homecoming week. I have a senior as well. I have a sophomore, junior, and a senior. They're depressed. And we have, my husband's here. I mean, we're married. We're fairly stable people. But, you know, we support our kids. We make sure they have what they need. But there are so many kids that don't have that. There are bad parents out there. Unfortunately, that is the truth. Parents who aren't caring whether their kids are getting on and doing their work. They're not. They don't care. They just don't. They're checked out. Whatever the issue is, we need them in school. It is the best place for everybody to be. We take risks absolutely every day, getting out of bed. Everything we do is a risk. Driving to work, walking the dog. You could be hit by a car. I mean, there's risks in everything we do. We should be able to choose what risks we're willing to take, what risks are okay to live, to be for our mental health and well-being. We can safely open the schools. As a nurse, I firmly believe this, and I think all of my colleagues would agree. We can safely open the schools, get our kids in school full-time, and still protect those who are at risk. It is completely possible if you would let us help. Let us in, let us help. We have a lot of ideas. Just in closing, I just want to say that I would just encourage everybody to turn off the TV, to turn off the social media, reach out to our local physicians, our local counselors, child psychologists, nurses, pastors, the elderly. Ask them, you know, their thoughts. What are they seeing in their practice? What are they seeing, you know, with their fellow parishioners and just everybody? And I think you'll get a pretty general consensus that kids are struggling, people are struggling. I mean, this world has gone crazy and everybody is so mean. I mean, you're attacked if you have a different opinion. And I would just like to see that stop. So I just encourage you to reach out to those people and to get some solid, you know, real life facts from people from our local community. And then ask yourself, does what we're currently doing make sense? And are we causing more harm by our response to COVID than COVID itself? And then I think we need to switch gears a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sarah. Hagerly, yep.
Is that okay if I take this off? Okay, thanks you guys. I would first off just notice there's not a lot of volleyball pictures up here, and so I'm gonna have to make a change there. My name is Sarah Hagerly. I'm the head volleyball coach, also a mom of kids in the school district, and I was asked to speak more on the mental health of where our kids are right now. I'm not a public speaker, I'm a coach, and so I just ran from the gym. I looked disheveled because I was coaching the kids before I came, but I left practice because I think this is important. I love Jamestown, I love living here, I love the school district, and I didn't always feel that way when I first moved here. But I want you to know that I love being a part of this community, I love being a part of this school district, and I'm proud to be a Blue Jay. And I don't think I always felt that way, but I can say honestly that I do now. As a mom of teenage girls, you know, it's easy to say that they're emotional. These last 7 months have been the toughest I've ever been through as a mom. And if you have any kids, any high school age kids that have gone through this right now, there's really no words that you can't help your kids because our opinions don't matter, and I understand that. My opinion as a mom and is whether I should wear a mask or whether they should go to school full time, that stuff doesn't matter because I'm not a decision maker. But I want you guys to understand that our kids are indeed hurting. I have a senior daughter who has dreamed of being a senior her whole young life, and that got taken away from her regular senior year. And I will say there's been a lot of good normal things that have been put back into place in our school district, and for that I'm very grateful. But the amount of fear that goes and anxiety in our kids right now I want you guys to visit with them about it. The other day I said to Grace, how you doing okay? Are you doing okay? She said, yeah, I'm doing okay. And I said, how you doing? She goes, I'm scared every moment of the day. I'm scared I'm gonna get COVID. I'm scared my school's gonna shut down. I'm scared that I'm not gonna have a graduation. I'm scared I'm not gonna have a homecoming. I'm scared I'm not gonna have a senior volleyball season. I'm scared I'm not gonna be able to go to college next year. And these are just tip of the, every single one of the kids have different fears, but it all feels the same. That being from a mom side of things, we have, as a coach, I just want to share with you, we did a little experiment in the gym the other day. And this was a Wednesday, so they didn't have school. And so they come in usually after school, they kind of draggle in with their backpacks after a long day of class, and they're tired. But this is a day that they didn't have school. So they came in, and we have the lights dimmed, and they kind of come in, and they're kind of subdued. And I said, all right, how are you guys doing today? And there was really quiet and Kaylee's here, she can almost speak to that day. It was just it was a low day, and it was right when school started. And I said, all right, we're gonna do a quick experiment. I'm all about it. If you ever watch me coach, I'm kind of engaged in what we're doing all the time. So I really wanna see what these guys are feeling. So I said, I want you guys to go to court 1. We have 8 courts in our gym. If any of you have cried in the last 2 days, okay, this is not a girl thing. This is not about being a girl. I said, if you've cried in the last 2 days, I want you to go to court 1. So they all followed me, and we went to court 1. And there was about 5 kids left back that were kind of like, well, I don't think I've cried in the last few days. And we kind of joked with them, and I called them a robot jokingly. And they stayed back, and they kind of watched the experiment occur. And I went through each court and added a series of stronger emotions. So the next one was, have you cried both days? Next court, all of the people followed, including myself. Then we went to the next court, and it was, have you sobbed uncontrollably the last 2 days? And everybody followed. These kids are so sad. So we went around the gym, and by the end, there was a couple of us standing there just our complete depression. And there's different stages of sadness in our gym. And so we sat down in the varsity, we drew pictures on how we were feeling. We made a list of things we want to get better at, because that to me is important, because we're allowed to play volleyball. And then we made a list, we had them draw pictures of how they're currently feeling. Every picture is tears or stress or anxiety or fear, or there's not one positive thing. And I went home and read that, crying, feeling terrible. How can I help the situation? Because I really can't. So I came back the next day, and I decided that we're gonna have a new motto, and it's to be grateful. We are extremely grateful that we're in the gym. These are kids that are allowed to play their sport they love, and they're still sad. They get to go to school 2 days a week, and they're still sad. So I guess what I'm asking is, I don't even know what the answer is. I know you guys are way smarter than I am, but I just wanted to speak to the emotions our kids are facing right now. They're glad to be in the gym. We are working so hard to keep our kids safe. Between Jim and I, we're working hard. We're working together. We're like trying to figure out how can we keep our kids 6 feet apart for less than 15 minutes. We're keeping track of how many minutes we're practicing close by each other. We're working on it, you guys. We really are. We're taking it serious. Our whole school's taking it serious. So I just want you to know that, I'm grateful for the school district. I'm grateful for the school board. You guys have always done a great job of encouraging our program, specifically, that I can speak to that. But all the other programs. And I notice you guys are you're in a tough position to make good decisions for our whole group of people. But I do think we need to rethink on things we can do special for our kids. Be creative. Ask parents to help. I'd love to be on a committee. Hey, let's throw something for the homecoming kids. Let's do something special for the seniors. They've had everything taken away. And they deserve something really special. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, Brenda Kirkovy.
Hi there. I'm Brenda Kirkovy, and my husband and I and our 2 kids moved about 12 years ago to Jamestown from Fargo. And my husband's a college professor at University of Jamestown. I work for a financial services company in town. We have 1 kid in the middle school, 1 kid in the high school, and I'd like to address the current situation with the 2 days face-to-face learning. From my perspective, the spring went very well for the kids. Both of our kids thrived with the spring program. I'm not sure what that all has to do with. I'm trying to kind of sort through it myself, but the current Schoolology system that we seem to be using does not seem like it's very successful. One of the things that we're finding is that there's communications in all kinds of different systems at the high school level as well as the middle school level. And to expect our kids that are middle schoolers or high schoolers to find direction on what the assignments are and where they need to go to locate what the expectation is and the due dates and everything else involved from all sorts of different systems seems to be a bit much for teenagers. I would liken it to putting the responsibility on our kids today at the middle school and the high school of college students. And that's very realistically what we're expecting of them at both the middle school and the high school. They're having to be very self-directed, and I'm all for self-directed. I want to build that in my kids. My kids generally, we've got one on each end of the spectrum. We've got one that's a 4.0 student and doesn't, she's a hard worker. She does very well, okay? And then we have one on the other end of the spectrum where we need to work with him. He's a little bit of attention deficit, and we got to keep moving him along, kind of a thing. Both are struggling under this 2 days a week. I would highly encourage you to seek out something else. I would love 5 days face-to-face. If we can't do 5 days face-to-face, I would suggest something like 2 days a week in person and 2 days a week where they have to log in while the other half is in school. Because these kids have 3 days a week with nothing to do. And I'm at home, working from home, so I can hold my own kids accountable. But I would say I'm a rarity. My husband's in the classroom at University of Jamestown 5 days a week, teaching face-to-face. And we all know that the numbers at University of Jamestown aren't zero, right? And they continue, and they continue to do that. So I would just stress that we need to look at a few things. And for the benefit of our kids and their learning, we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions. And one of the things that I'd be curious on is what is the attendance rate since all this happened? And I'm not talking about kids that are sick with COVID or close quarters. Kids, to some of these other parents' points, don't want to go to school. And it's not because once they're there, they want to be there. They want to be there with their friends, with their teachers. They want to learn. But 2 days on and 3 days off, kids need structure, and they need some stability. And so that 2-3 kind of a thing just really kind of runs amok for these kids, unfortunately. So I just think that there must be a better way to do that particular piece. Like I say, whether it's requiring them to log in during the 3 days where, they're not technically in school, because also these middle school and high schoolers don't need 3 days with nothing to do. I mean, and I'm telling you, they get their homework done, and that's all fine and dandy. But with 3 days with nothing scheduled, it's going to be a problem for our kids. And I would say it's not going to be a problem for the kids of the parents that are good enough to come and talk to you today. It's got to be a huge problem for the other kids that aren't even showing up for school. So I would ask you to look at the attendance rates. And like I say, let's not use the excuse of COVID, keeping all these kids out of school. And I would also ask you to look at grades. You could take a random sample of kids in the middle school or high school or both. And I could almost guarantee you that almost without exception, those kids' grades are lower than they were last year. And I'm not even talking about the emotional pieces affecting things. I'm talking about the program that we have set up for our kids to learn. So I guess, in closing, I would just, again, offer up the assistance to help in any way, shape, or form. My background is in financial services and in compliance and risk, ironically. And I'm used to doing random samples and things like that. My husband has a statistical background. He teaches psychology, of all things. And so take advantage of some of these resources that you have. I just think that, and teachers know, I'm sure the teachers have provided plenty of feedback as well, that it's not working for them either. I'm not pointing fingers at teachers. So I guess in closing, I would just suggest that we do some sort of testing of what our results are. And I know it's not going to be perfect, and I know it's not going to be equal to last year, but I think you would be astounded by how these students are struggling under this current situation. And that's even aside from COVID. It's just what we've set up. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Just like to say thank for all the people that had the communication tonight, and you have been heard. So, moving on to D, is there any conflicts of interest to declare? Heidi?
I just want to remind the board that my sister is part of Shower and Associates. We went through that at the time.
This is
of-
just informational.
Yep, I know. Just
So-
want to remind the board as always.
Okay. No conflicts of interest. Moving on to consent agenda, motion to approve. Motion by Bob. Seconded by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into our regular agenda, we have nothing under recognition or correspondence. Reports, student council report, we have no? Okay, moving on to superintendent's report. Rob?
Thank you. You have my written report. Just an update on the board education that you'll be hearing later. Of course, we know every year that we have Linda from Shower and Associates come and present to us on the findings of the audit. We felt it would be valuable for the board to hear a little bit more about the process. What's the process that they use? Less about the report, more about the process. So we're very thankful that Linda is here. Also joining us, Ashley Holcalter is a member of our Teacher Leadership Academy, and she's going to share some perspective on that program and how that's operating, and again, her perspectives on that. So through, as is written in my report, the education core funding, those are new dollars that are coming to districts. They're really pretty limited, but they're coming to us through CARES. So CARES, as we know, federal dollars, they're flowing through back to schools. They came into the state, flowing back to us through the Emergency Commission. And so there are the federal rules that exist. They have to be spent before December 31st, which, unless that's extended in some way, which we won't know until probably sometime in November. But through the Emergency Commission, they've put additional governors on these funds. And so they're really pretty limited, unfortunately, for the amount of money that we are eligible to expend, or I should say be reimbursed for. So it's about $507,000. But again, you're fairly limited in the use of essentially what they say is personnel, not programs or products. So they have to be used on personnel. And when you consider between what's happening right now, or our date right now, and December 31st, not an awful lot of time when there's limiting factors like that. So the purpose of the funds, additional staffing needs caused by COVID-19 to provide support and services to K-12 students in North Dakota. I did link some of the potential uses that are outlined by the Department of Public Instruction, but we do have to follow what's called supplement, not supplant rules. I specifically asked about any repurposed staff that we have, and those are approved. So if we've repurposed staff that in the past worked in one area, and now we have shifted them to work in into a virtual setting, for example, or do some additional support for our virtual academy, those would be allowable expenses. So for example, we have repurposed some of our TAG staff to support K through 5 Jamestown Virtual Academy. 100% of that time that they're allocated, we could actually use through these funds. Okay? What we couldn't do is additional PPE. That's not allowable. We couldn't pay for the tuition costs for the virtual academy. We can't pay for the curriculum, although I think we were sound fiduciaries by not choosing to add staff. We purchased a program because that was the most efficient, but unfortunately that's not an allowable expense. Go ahead.
You'll probably take questions at the end, but I might forget. How many students right now, what's our enrollment in the virtual academy today?
132. So we do have staff at every level, and one of the questions that I've been asked a few times is what are we seeing the biggest challenges within the school setting with staffing? It's the virtual academy. When we selected this product, what we were told, and a number of us sat in on the webinar and asked a lot of questions, and it's substantially a greater time burden for our teachers than what we expected. Whether that is pacing plans, whether that's grading assignments, whether that is the connection, it is just more than those people can handle. Even at the high school and middle school level, when we have that Wednesday day for planning, it's not enough time. They are spending time preparing for their classes and spending time preparing to teach in a virtual environment. So there is simply not enough time for those folks. It is far too burdensome. And so we need help there, whether that's repurposing staff, whether that is bringing new staff on board with these funds. That has to be a priority for us. I feel for our teachers with the virtual academy. They're taking on a greater burden than I think that they can handle. And I think we need to find them some help quickly. These funds came at a good time for that, because we are really seeing the time burden we expected is far greater, or is far less. We're just seeing far more time associated to this than we expected to see, and we need to get them some help. So again, there is potential for that deadline to extend beyond December 31st. We aren't going to know that till fairly late. I think we need to be nimble in our planning for the use of these funds, because we want to be able to use the funds that we need, but we want to be nimble enough, because if that deadline is extended, that gives us more time, obviously, and so we want to have that flexibility to ensure that we're using those dollars the best that we can. But that's one challenge I see, and I don't think I'm going to talk much more about the virtual academy outside of our expectation to be able to progress monitor and do a couple of assignment grading. That is not the case. There's far more hours. We've had some staff with significant time devoted to this project, and like I said, we need to get them some help. That's specifically true at the 6 through 12 level, because we've repurposed those staff already. We had already planned to do that at the elementary level. We're not seeing the same level of need for our classroom teachers at the K through 5 level. But 6 through 12, it is a burden, and something that we need to address. But again, the idea would be to repurpose those staff that we can, and add some staff using these core funds if we're unable to do that. Questions on that before I move on?
Jason?
I guess the concern I have about the K-5 would be, can we not look at using some of these funds also, or maybe I missed it, but do we plan on our TAG instructors continuing with the virtual academy? Because my concern then is that's another service to our students that we've repurposed.
Yeah, that's fair. Right now, yes, those are our experts in our district in this platform. And right now, they are spending quite a bit of time. The plan has been for them to spend some time with the virtual academy and then still continue to provide TAG, less in a pull-out setting, more in a classroom support setting. How can we support the needs of all of our students in the classroom rather than pulling them out? And that's been a transition we've been talking about at the TAG level for a while, but we certainly could provide some additional help at the K through 5 level. I'm certainly not suggesting that we couldn't do that. I think it's less necessary than it is at the 6 through 12 level.
Melissa and Bob?
Are we able to use some of the CARES funds to do like extended contracts for those teachers who have the virtual academy students to help supplement those extra hours that they're paying?
Yep, we could, and that's something that we've also talked about as well. I think the biggest priority is getting that off their table, or, off their hands completely. But if we couldn't, we certainly could do that as well.
Bob?
Dr. Leck, do you think that there's going to be, I read about the possibility of extending the timeline at the end of the year. Do you think there's a possibility that if a significant amount of dollars can't be spent, that the DPI might also give us a little more flexibility?
So I was actually on the planning team for this. We created the allocation mechanism. I can tell you the Department of Public Instruction fought fairly hard for us to have greater flexibility. This was not their decision, it's the Emergency Commission that controls the dollars. These were currently set in the Bank of North Dakota. The department, I was very pleased with them pushing back and asking for greater flexibility so we could use it in a manner that suits our own individual needs. Personnel is certainly part of that, but I think there are instances in which programs and products are equally important. If you consider the initial ESSER funding allocation model, it was on the title formula. So what that meant was it went more to poverty districts, got a greater share, and that's obviously important. You couldn't do that again. The disappointing thing, because there's just too many dollars, that it becomes a little bit inequitable if you were to do that model again. This model allowed for every district to have $30,000 plus a per pupil allocation. That was certainly more equitable than using a title model. But the challenging thing with it has been the ESSER dollars. I think we all know we went through an ESSER budget. Were far more uses for the dollars, and these are far more restrictive. So our smallest schools got very, very little in ESSER funding and getting a much bigger chunk here, but there's more limitations, and that's the challenge. But I would say I was very pleased with the department for the push that they gave to make sure as much flexibility as was allowed as possible. The repurposing of staff, allowing that under supplements of plant was a big piece. It would have been very, very difficult to come close to any allocation in any district of actually reaching that expenditure without that flexibility.
Jason?
Virtual academy topic again, and the concern at the high school, well, middle and high school level. What process, and I'm just curious, what process was used in determining like the workload, or how many students would be given to each teacher? Can you kind of run through how that process worked?
It really depends on the level, but they were connected to advisories. And the intention was to progress monitor and connect with kids. And if that's what we were doing, progress monitoring, connecting with kids, making sure that our virtual academy students know that they are still Jamestown Public School students. And they eventually are going to transition back into the classroom, and hopefully this year, where they connect back into a classroom with their peers and with their teachers, and that connection was important to us. So the model was built around that they would be progress monitoring and connecting with home at least once a week. That is not, unfortunately, what, if for each class we had to walk in and do a pacing plan for each class. There are a review of all of the curriculum, all of the assessments in the curriculum. It has been substantially more than the expectation. And so that's taken on far more time. And it's simply not time that our staff has to give in their normal day.
Heidi?
Just as we proceed, and I know you've outlined a couple different things here, but have more staff with the progress monitoring. Are we still going to have our classroom teachers connect with those students? Because I do think that that's just for social emotional support. I think that's important in making them feel part of their class, and because they're not in school any days of the week.
Yeah, I agree. That's something that we would want to continue to connect with our students from that capacity, yeah.
Any other questions? Jason?
Would there be an opportunity, one, to, or I don't know if extended contracts offering, that would work into our, offering if teachers want the extra work and offer extended contracts? That would be my first question, or you don't need to even comment, but I also wonder if, like, our instructional coaches, would they have time to do any of that workload or no?
From a from a 6 through 12 level, instructional coaches are actually the first place I look to see if that was potential to take on that burden. And I would say after we looked at what the expectations are in maintaining that connection to classroom, that they kind of quickly shifted away, from my mindset. But the question related to extended contracts, I'll change the verbiage. I don't consider it to be an extended contract, but there absolutely will be opportunities to look at, I think a great use of these funds will be looking at Schoology, preparing content online, and providing a stipend to how we would have to look at what the measurable, what's the deliverable that we want to see. For example, one class fully inputted into Schoology, and we would assess how many days we felt like that was worth, how many days in a standard person that would account for. And I know at the state level we talked about a state average, and paying that state average on a daily rate, that's $225 a day. And so that's the standard that we looked at. And we would just have to determine what's the appropriate number of days for what we're asking for. So we absolutely did think of that. I think it would be a fantastic use of those funds. It would build capacity right now, but build capacity in the future for working through Schoology. And I agree that it would be on a choice basis, not a mandate. It would be an opportunity exists for X amount of days to input on Schoology.
Any other questions for Rob?
I do have more in my report.
Okay, go ahead. Yep.
Okay, so in the next, moving into my report, the Southeast Education Cooperative, I'm just providing this as information for the board. I think most people understand, we have a regional education association. For us, it's the SEC, Southeast Education Cooperative. These are organizations that exist to help schools work together, whether they are the largest of schools or the smallest of schools. Most schools or most REAs really kind of focus first on professional development, but it's an organization that supports far more than that. There's also a lot of administrative functions and cost-saving efficiencies that come from the SEC for us. Our primary uses in the last year have been professional development. Improving academic literacy is a good example of that. And we've also worked with them through some consultation for grant writing in the last couple of years. Our Striving Readers grant and our Closed grant were both supported in grant writing consultation from the SEC. We do Reading Corps, 21st Century After School programming. We have Medicaid billing through the SEC, which has been a great avenue, not just to save time for our people upstairs, but they do an excellent job of ensuring that we get all the reimbursement. We've seen a great deal of savings come back to the district because of Medicaid billing as well. We operate through Frontline, that is our human resources portal, and we also get Title III, which is EL support through them. And I would draw your attention, we'll talk a little bit later about state funding as we go through our budget hearing, but I would just draw your attention to line 11, it's the REA funding. You've heard me say this before, but that is not funding that we get. The REA funding, our state funding, is the mechanism through which REAs are funded. When we make our determination for how much revenue we get as a school district, we take that money out. We deduct it because that's not money we see. It flows directly through the REA as base funding for them. So I just draw your attention to that as well. I think everything else that you have in here will be part of a board agenda item later. I would last just draw your attention to our current phase is green. We met last week, and the suggestion to stay in our current instructional plan of Instructional Plan 2. And we will meet again. We meet twice a month. We will meet sometime during the week of the 28th through October 2nd. And just for clarification, throughout the day today, I reached out to some superintendents, and I just want to quickly review. These are the districts that responded. I think when I just want to be sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what other districts are doing when you're looking at districts our size. Very difficult to compare to smaller districts because they have fewer kids, and the rules and our ability to mitigate are just different than it is for Pingree or for Carrington. They're different. We have a different number of students. But if you look at our peers in the Class A ranks, I'll just go through those that have responded. In Bismarck, they are K-12 hybrid. Beginning next week, they will be K-5 face-to-face. They are considering a mid-October return for middle school, and they follow the WDA guidance for activities. In Devils Lake, they have the exact same plan that we do, elementary face-to-face, middle and high school in a 2-day-a-week hybrid. They have no fans allowed at any activities. In Dickinson, they are hybrid K-12. I just talked with Dr. Hawker probably a couple of hours before this meeting. He said they are in discussions now about closing their high school and going virtual for a few weeks due to student and staff absences, and they also follow WDA protocols for activities. In Fargo, they began the year hybrid K-12. That changed today, and they went to elementary hybrid and secondary, so middle school, high school, all virtual through October 19th. For activities, they are 2 tickets per event participant, or they follow the rules of the host school. So if they come to Jamestown, they would follow our rules for activities. In Grand Forks, they're face-to-face K-8, hybrid 9-12. Dr. Brenner also shared with me that they have 1,300 students in the virtual academy. Like I said, we were at 132. In Jamestown, you know what we are. We're full-time face-to-face in K-5, hybrid in 6 through 12. We have 130 students approximately in virtual academy, and we follow the WDA guidelines for activities. In Mandan, they're full-time face-to-face in K-5, hybrid 6 through 12, so that looks exactly like ours. They are working with Bismarck and looking to, and they're considering bringing back 6 through 8 on October 19th, but that is not a decision they have made yet. They follow WDA protocols for tickets, and they have approximately 400 in their virtual academy. In Minot, they are K-12 face-to-face. They follow WDA regulations on activities, and they have 1,000 students in the virtual academy. In West Fargo, they are K-12 hybrid. K-12 hybrid. They hope to bring back K-5 students in face-to-face soon, but that decision hasn't been made yet. In Williston, they are K through 6, Monday through Thursday, with Fridays off for deep cleaning and other supplements, similar to how we would use our Wednesday. With the middle school and high school and hybrid, and they have 600 students in the virtual academy. So those are the ones that responded to me this afternoon. So questions on you had a question?
Heidi?
I'm just sort of curious, and maybe you don't know this. I know that activities and those kinds of things are important to students and their families. Does Devils Lake then stream all their events do you know? And then where are we at are we able to stream ours?
So I've watched some of our events streamed already. And I know Devils Lake, I think they stream everything, although I couldn't speak to that. I only know the ones I've watched, or the one I watched, activity that I was able to watch. But I'm assuming they stream everything. But
Jason?
And I, kind of on that topic, it seems like everybody is kind of doing their own thing, yet there's some similar threads. And of course, we can't respond to the public discussion tonight, but the next meeting for you folks to assess where we're at is late September, early October, it looked like. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity between now and then to do some sort of a public input forum. where, and this is just thinking out of the box, but Dr. Leck would have an opportunity to speak about our rationale and how we've gotten here and why we're doing what we're doing, and then even allow people to give some input that perhaps could be used by the committee at that meeting. Just a thought, I just feel it's time, and I think people would feel a lot better if they had a chance to speak out. It really concerns me when I hear stakeholders say that they feel they don't have an avenue to express their opinions, and I know that they do, so why some folks are feeling that, I'm not sure, but
Jason?
just a thought.
That is on the agenda later on here.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, Rob? Not, is anybody here for the finance hearing? If not, I mean, could we go, if it's already at the board, if we go through the board education first and then come with that? So, okay, let's go, and then we'll go on to board education. Ashley Holcalter has Teacher Leadership Academy.
Get this up and running again here.
Might have to get closer to the mic to.
Okay.
There we go.
Quentin always saves the day. All right, my name is Ashley Holcalter. I teach 5th grade at Roosevelt. I'm currently in my 4th year of teaching. I was born and raised in Jamestown. I'm very proud to be a Blue Jay, and I'm excited to be a part of this district and be here to talk to you about this opportunity that myself and the rest of our cohort took advantage of when it came to Jamestown. So an overview of the Teacher Leadership Academy. We are taking 5 semesters and we will earn our master's degree in educational leadership. So our cohort started in June of 2019 and we will graduate in this December of 2020. We meet twice a month during the school year from 4 to 8 p.m. and 6 times over the summer from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We do meet face-to-face, however, under our current circumstances over the summer, we met virtually over NDSU's platform that they use, Blackboard, and we were still able to collaborate using their different avenues that they have and the way that they had that set up. So that worked really well for us. In class, we participate in a class discussion about current topics that relate to our classes that we are taking. We engage in collaborative partner work, and we've also been lucky enough to have a few discussion panels with people that are leaders in our community as well as leaders in our school district. Each member is required to complete 110 practicum hours as well as carry out and present an action research project. For our practicum hours, Dr. Leck created kind of a catalog for us to fulfill our practicum hours, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's say if something else came up in our buildings that isn't exactly in that catalog, but it's going to benefit our district, pending Dr. Leck's approval, we're able to do that as well. For example, when we started back up this year, I offered my assistance to our principal because there was conflicts in scheduling and needing to take notes at meetings and send them out to staff that couldn't be there. So those are some of the things that I have done. We also have signature assignments for each class, and those signature assignments have to correlate with the standards sent to us by NDSU, or given to us by NDSU. Some of the benefits of the Teacher Leadership Academy that definitely drew me towards this program. We'll complete 5 semesters as opposed to 6 in a traditional master's setting, while also teaching full-time. So we're able to do that and, of course, teach in our classrooms. I really loved the idea of in-person meetings. I do feel meeting virtually is a great resource that we're able to use. However, there's, nothing that beats in-person collaborative discussion. So I really have enjoyed that piece. The Burgum Foundation also pays for 50% of our tuition, which is very nice, and we're all very appreciative of that, I know. The TLA has instilled strong leadership qualities in all of its members. So the first probably 1 or 2 semesters, we focused a lot on just getting to know ourselves and our own capabilities that we possess, and how when we look to leadership, we shouldn't always look towards our principals or our superintendents or our instructional coaches in our building, but we all hold the capabilities and the assets to be good leaders in our schools, even as teachers. The members have taken a deeper dive into the needs of their district, building, and community. I love that this program is really centered around our district and how we can make it better, and our community. Being from Jamestown, I of course have a lot of love for this town, and it's been really rewarding to learn so much more about this district and our community and how we can help. And we also, also teamed up with Edgeley. So building relationships with members of other districts has been another benefit. Being Edgeley is a smaller district, it's been fun to be able to compare and contrast kind of the differences and similarities that we have in our districts. And it's also been nice to build a personal relationship with all of these members of our cohort. I've enjoyed learning their teaching styles and different things they bring to their classrooms, and things that have worked for them or have not worked for them, and things that I can use in my classroom as well. So here's more of a breakdown of our practicum hours. We have 20 mandatory hours that consist of looking over handbooks or policies that Dr. Leck has assigned to us. We also were assigned kind of an activity of how we can build culture in our buildings, as well as encouraging teaching as a career. We all know that we need more teachers. So, and then we have 55 district initiative hours. And this to me is the biggest benefit to any district that participates in TLA, because everything that's listed in that catalog and everything that we're doing as TLA members is directly affecting our district in a positive way. For example, some of the things that I have participated in is a group of us took a visit to Northern Cass when we were trying to decide what social emotional learning curriculum we wanted to use. A group of us have looked over the emergency plan and made some revisions and different ways to improve parent involvement are just a few examples that kind of fit under that bracket. And then we all have 35 hours of additional things that we can complete, and there are things in the catalog that fit in there as well. Some examples might be technology education. Teachers can conduct book studies and professional development for staff. Some of the things that I have done myself, I did some makerspace professional development on how to use some of the technology in there. Like I said, I went with a group of teachers to Northern Cass, and those are just to name a few. And lastly, our action research project. So each member is required to carry out and present their findings from their action research project to the school board. This has required a lot of proper planning. We started this process all the way back in June, and we're still actively working on it and coming to a close soon. So it's really been about setting aside non-negotiable time to do your research and read all of the research articles we want to add to our lit review. And it also has required a lot of true passion for your project. It's the way that I could describe it is really it's in your face every day. So you see it every day and you work with it every day. So if you don't have passion for it, it's going to make the process quite a bit longer and not as enjoyable. And flexibility as well. Due to the current circumstances and the pandemic that we've experienced, some of Our members at the end of last year didn't get to collect all of their data. So they've really kind of had to switch gears and figure out what their paper is going to look like without their data. And so just having a growth mindset when things don't go our way. I can give you, I guess, a glimpse of my action research project. I did the impact of using the Daily 5 method explicitly in a 5th grade classroom. I took some quantitative data and qualitative data on surveys, and I used some STAR test scores to see their growth over a 4-month period. And I've really enjoyed analyzing all of the data through my action research project, and I'm excited to present that when we get there. So that is what I have. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer?
Any questions? Aaron?
How many are enrolled in this program right now?
Oh, gosh. How many is it? 14?
14. 9 from Jamestown, 5 from Edgeley. Well, 4 from Edgeley and 1 now from Mandan.
Yeah, she.
And who facilitates and administers the program?
Dr. Leck is our cohort leader for Jamestown, and then Edgeley Superintendent, Mr. Hansen, and then we have a professor from NDSU that kind of oversees all of our project as well. His name is Dr. Flowers. And he comes to all the classes that he can get to. We started with 2 other advisors, but they were kind of working some kinks out. So, but now we've had Dr. Flowers for quite a while.
If you know Dr. Flowers, the former superintendent in Fargo and West Fargo, probably our very best. We couldn't have been luckier than to get Dave to commit to our cohort. He is the university liaison. So really how it works is there's a university liaison and a district liaison. Because we wanted to include Jamestown as a rural hub, we invited a rural school to participate. This isn't something you could do on your own. And so we invited Edgeley to participate with us. And so Mr. Hansen, who's the superintendent there, and the idea of the whole TLA is that you are connected to the academic program through NDSU. That's the university liaison's role. My role as the district liaison role is to talk about practicality. How does that apply? How does that, as a good example, when we're talking policy in Jamestown, when we're talking curriculum development in Jamestown, we could learn about these things at the academic level, and that's important. You know, the theory behind it is important, but the practical side is just as important. And so this type of environment really, I find it to be very engaging because it makes it real. It brings it onto that application, that practical level, alongside the academic. And it's been, for me included, I know Ashley has talked about how rewarding it's been for her, but I tell you, for me, it's been equally rewarding, not just to work with these 14 individuals who have done such a nice job, but it tells me a lot about the process. It helps me understand the process as well, and it's just been very rewarding for me as well.
Any other questions for her? None? Thanks for coming. Thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Next, we have Linda Schauer and Associates, the audit process.
You don't mind if I take this off? I don't know if you can hear me very well. I've audited Jamestown School for quite a few years now. I won't tell you how many years I've actually been an auditor. The process for Jamestown School as far as an audit is pretty much the way I approach any audit. You know, we pre-plan the audit. I generally bring 3 to 4 people with me and conduct the audit field work here. Some of the procedures that we do, we take some sample of receipts, disbursements, payroll, and then we evaluate and test those to make sure that the procedures we've been told are actually what is happening in the school, and determine whether or not you know, there's anything that can be changed. Part of the audit process, if we do have anything to suggest to make improvements, you know, that we kind of do it as a matter of course. So we also do confirmations. We confirm cash balances, bond balances with third parties. We confirm state and federal revenues with DPI. Do some analytical work comparing numbers, the current year that we're working on to the previous year. You know, what are the changes? Why are they changing? That can sometimes tell you whether or not there's an error in there. We do a lot of inquiry, talking to the staff, asking, you know, what do you do? What has changed? Part of the audit that we generally do for Jamestown School has always been a single audit because of the level of federal dollars that are received. And part of that audit includes testing for compliance to make sure that Jamestown School is following the compliance requirements of the federal audits. I guess we observe different procedures. You know, it's generally, we spend 3 to 4 days on site here at the school. Then it's a matter of going back to our office and pulling together the audit report and letting you know if there's any particular findings that we've discovered, if there's any adjustments we need to make, which we will provide to Sally. I guess it's just a lot of give and take conversation back and forth to make a determination whether or not the financial numbers that we end up with present fairly the financial position of Jamestown School. You know, it's kind of a quick overview. Every audit, in a lot of cases, we do some of the same procedures on each audit, but then each entity might be a little bit different in how they handle different things. Does anybody have some specific questions that I could answer?
Any questions for Linda or Aaron?
So within your audit, then, you can come out of that with, how do you classify it, you know, finding and observation? Can you just kind of expand a little bit on what that looks like?
I'm sorry.
Do you have different classifications for findings or observations as a course of the audit?
Generally, we might have minor adjustments to make. If we have any particular findings, they would, if they're serious, it's either a significant deficiency or a material weakness. Jamestown School generally doesn't have any major material weaknesses. An example of a material weakness would be a lack of segregation of duties. If you're unable to split the duties and have proper internal controls, that would be a material weakness in the system. Significant deficiency, I guess one that does show up in the audit every year, is the fact that Jamestown School is unable to prepare its own financial statements. And that's just kind of a deficiency that just about every small government in North Dakota has. And I guess anything lower than material weakness or a significant deficiency are just suggestions that we might offer for potential changes or corrections.
Any other questions? Heidi, do you have one or no? Okay, no questions. Thanks for coming, Linda, and we appreciate what you do for us. So.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on to the budget hearing. Rob, you want to?
Thank you. I will start. I have a memo that it's budget or a board memo 63 on our budget hearing. I'm going to briefly go through that. I want to share I'm hopeful that you had a chance to look at the maintenance of effort report. I think benchmarking is important as you look at districts similar to you, and you can have a sense of what is happening in districts similar to you. And I think what you find there is Jamestown's very consistent. There's areas in which we compare more favorably. There's areas that we compare less favorably. But as a general rule, we compare pretty consistently with our like-sized peers. If you look at, and so I'll go through this board memo a little bit about that maintenance of effort report. I'll stand for some questions, and then I'll turn it over to Sally to continue with sharing where we are at and our recommendations for this next tax year. In terms of hearing requirements, when we complete, there will be an opportunity if there are any individuals in the audience that wish to speak, you would have that opportunity to do so as part of this hearing. If you look at our current request and a historical comparison, if you use that standard of a $100,000 home, the school portion of those property taxes would be approximately $450 on that $100,000 home. With the continuation of the same tax levy as last year, the estimated school portion of the property taxes on a home with a value of $100,000 would continue to be $450, so there would be no change. Of course, as always, this does not consider any reassessment of property. We're talking an apples-to-apples comparison. So, of course, if a property is been reassessed, that valuation would be changed. Or because that valuation has changed, the taxation changes as well. I think it's also important to put these requests in historical context with the support that's been provided through legislative action on our buy-down of property taxes. The school portion compares favorably to local funding contributions in the recent past. In 2008-9, that total levy was 236.4 mils. It's currently, the proposal is 100 mils. So that's down significantly from 2008-9. Or that 236 mils was approximately $1,063 or $1,064 on a $100,000 home. So in 2008, that $450 looks pretty good. That decreased to 161.4 or $726 on a home valued at $100,000 in the 9-10 school year to 155.4 mils or $699 on a $100,000 home in 2009. I did give you a chart there that gives you an example from 2008 down to 2020, 2021. So in 13-14, we were at 101.82. We've been at 100 for the last 2 years and continue to be at 100 mils in this year. So you can see that tax impact as well. I've provided some links for you. I do a presentation to incoming superintendents every year. I also use it for new board member orientation, and that is kind of the School Finance 101. A number of you have heard that from me a number of times, so I won't go through that again. Outside to say, I hope that it's a resource for you if you have questions on the school finance side. I've also, because I think it's an important document that you see, our state aid payment worksheet. Our state aid is the most significant portion of the aid that we receive, comes from the state. And so I think it's important to look and be very, very aware of what happens and how that state aid is determined. One thing I'll point out with the state aid, and I'll get to this a little bit more in a bit, but a reminder that of those 100 mils, 60 of them are deducted from our state aid. So out of that 100 mils, 60% is deducted from our state aid. So I consider that a state levy, and we can talk a little bit more about that, and certainly ask questions if you have them, but it's a way of equalizing funding between school districts, because we know in past iterations of our funding formula, there has been property wealthy districts and there have been property poor districts. This is an equalizing formula. Power equalizes to ensure that every school is eligible for adequate funding. So if you look at funding formulas, there's two pieces that you need to be aware of. Everything is addressed in either an adequacy meaning what is the base level of funding any district needs to provide a high quality education. And then there's equity measures. Equity is about how do you ensure that schools have access to that adequate education. So if you look at our state aid payment worksheet, and I know you've heard this from me before, so I won't belabor the point, but every aspect of that can be considered either a component of adequacy or a mechanism to determine equity. Equity is determined by those 60 mils. So that is an equity mechanism, but it's really important for the board to be aware that we are deducted the value of those 60 mils every single year. So when you see that per pupil, that is not what a school district receives in funding. I mean, I get it. It makes common sense to say $10,036 times how many students you have, but that is not accurate. We're closer to 7,900 because those 60 mills, the value of those 60 mills are deducted from us. And again, it's the reason for that is understandable. It's to create a greater level of equity. So I have some definitions in this memo. I won't go over them unless you have specific questions. When we changed into this funding formula, one of the most important things you need to be aware of is we went from being property-centric from schools, that our focus is property-centric, to being student-centric. Because our state aid, which is driven by enrollment, became such a high percentage of our funding, we moved from being property-centric to being student-centric. Enrollment really, really matters. And so swings of enrollment are significant. Losing students or gaining students creates great swings in available funding. And so we have to monitor the impact of enrollment consistently. And because of that, we're very, very reliant on what happens at the state level. We saw that a session ago when we received 0% increase to the foundation aid payment. That had significant impact to school. What makes it even more difficult is those equity measures that we talked about. We didn't go into detail, but those equity measures we talk about, those increase every year. So what we bring in lieu of taxes, which are deducted, what we bring in for taxable value, which is deducted in those 60 mills, those increase every year. And a flat foundation aid amount does not mean flat funding. It means a decrease in funding. So if you remember when we went through this a couple of years ago, it was about $300,000 in year one and about $125,000 in year two that we saw decrease in funding. That doesn't include what we saw decreases for enrollment. We were actually growing in enrollment in one of those years. So flat funding does not mean, or flat foundation aid amount does not mean flat funding. And we try to do our very best to educate our legislators when that time comes too, because I'm not sure everybody always understands the impacts of those equity strategies and how they impact school funding. But I'm very, very concerned about our upcoming session. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging for a state, and it's going to be very, very challenging for schools. We're fortunate to have the Foundation Aid Stabilization Fund, which is a way to help keep us whole. So allotments, a dirty word in education budgeting sessions, is allotments are deductions, a 10% decrease in your funding. We are lucky in that we probably won't see that, or at least not as drastic. We have a constitutional fund that helps to keep us whole. That happened because of, in the 80s, when we saw huge decreases, schools were not held harmless. It was very, very challenging for those that were around during that time. But I'm very, very concerned about what's going to happen in our next legislative session. And a reminder that a frozen per pupil is not held harmless in terms of dollars. It's a net decrease. Budget deficit and ending fund balance. We're happy to say that the budget that we'll present on paper provides a projected carryover around $170,000. I will say that the district set 12% of total expenditures as a healthy ending fund balance. For those that are aware, as I'm sure most of you are, what you're allowed to carry over is 35% plus 20,000. 35% is what we would be able to carry over. We're obviously not there at 12% as a target, but we don't need to be more than 12%. I think in that 12 to 15% is a safe range to be at, and we aren't there yet. But I think that's a safe benchmark for us to target, and that's what the board has set, is 12% of anticipated expenditures. So that amount is about $3.8 million, with the beginning of the year ending fund balance at a little over 3.2. Even with a projected carryover, you're still significantly lower than that. But again, I think it's a nice target to be at, and I think it's an important target to get to. I still continue to have concerns about our cap at 70 general fund mills. We certainly know that 100 mills is at the high end of where our community feels it can be. And we need to be very, very cognizant of that. And really, we have very limited options in terms of where we might be able to go locally. We are at the limit of where we could be at. And I think as you look at a year in which we're going to see a challenging legislative session, those are concerns. And I know a lot of people around these tables have been through this already, and you know what it's like. And I think you need to brace yourself for that again. So questions on that first, and I'll go into the maintenance of effort.
Jason?
Just real quick, the fund you said North Dakota has to keep us whole. So if that's the case, then is that the same thing as you were talking about? That would be an actual decrease? Or are those two different things?
So it's a good question. They're two different things, but they're connected. So the Foundation Aid Stabilization Fund is a constitutional fund. It was voted in the 80s when we saw the first real difficult time out west. And so that fund can be, when an allotment occurs, so when the governor determines an allotment in departments, that's when legislators can determine to access that fund. So they can use that to keep us whole. They can use that to fill the gap, the funding gap of what's available. And they did that. Yep, and they did that a couple years ago. So that might keep us whole in terms of our per pupil amount. But what I'm saying is your deductions, your equity deductions, your adjustments, they increase every year. So even if you have the same number of students and the same per pupil amount, you still get less from the state because your deductions, your adjustments increase every year. Unless they wouldn't increase, but that isn't going to happen.
Any other questions? No? Okay.
So I'm going to move on very quickly to the maintenance of effort report. And maybe I would just open it up for questions if people had any. Again, the whole purpose of it in this document, I'm just bringing it up here, is really just trying to compare. I call it benchmarking. Compare us, and so the districts that I use to compare us, Devils Lake, Dickinson, Mandan, Valley City. So section 1 compares, it utilizes mainly 2020 finance facts, which you can find at the Department of Public Instruction. And that compares revenue, fund balance, expenditure performance of our district in relation to peer districts. And then section 2 provides a little bit of historical financial information and trends for Jamestown Public Schools. Again, I just think it's important that we look to benchmark and not just look at our own district in a vacuum, but look at us compared to our peers, our same size peers, because that I think gives us the best comparables. In taxable value, I kind of walked through a little bit on the process, how you determine taxable value and taxation, how that's different for residential, commercial, and centrally assessed properties. And maybe the best way would just be to stand for questions if you have any. There's a lot of information here. I'm sure you looked this over already. But my intention for it is to provide it as information and context and hopefully build on this every year to help you as you go through the process of benchmarking the district.
Any questions regarding that, or Aaron?
Just one item that I thought would be interesting too, to maybe include in this is the demographics, possibly in terms of average years of service or something along those lines.
Yeah. I actually looked at that. That's a good, you're saying for our staff and look at years of service. I actually looked at that. It was difficult in the time period. I didn't feel like asking those districts in the midst of COVID to do me a solid and provide that information on a short term. But absolutely, my intention is to grow this over time. And so if you have ideas on what types of comparisons you'd like to see, absolutely, let me know. And that is one that I thought about doing, and I think it would be a really good one.
Any other questions for Rob? None? Okay, done with the, Sally?
More budget stuff. Typically, for those of you that have been on the board for a while, we do a draft budget in June, and then we usually do a final budget in July. With the changes, the certificate of indebtedness that we just did, and the changes in mill levy, I feel like I'm going to bring budget revisions every other month. And also, you just heard Dr. Leck talk about more federal funding, so that has to be, we just got word on that. So in a couple months, we will have to put that budget together and, bring to you for approval. And there will still be budget changes in federal programs, so it's going to be an ever-changing. But I'll summarize what I have here. I presented final budgets to you in July, but with the $3.92 million that we, with the certificate of indebtedness, there were some revisions that I made to, and to the final mill levies also. And the final mill levy is our best guess. According to the county's website and emailing the county, this is the number that we have currently, but they truly aren't certified until November. And so we just have to do the best we can with.
So just for clarification, you're talking taxable value.
Taxable value.
The mill levy is, you're talking taxable value.
Well, the mill levy, which is, yes.
But you're talking taxable value is going to change.
The taxable value, and so the mill levy isn't truly certified until November. But we have to do our budget projections based on our October 10th deadline and finalize that with the county. So I've also, in the general fund, adjusted that to the mill levy amount in the revenue and adjusted final allocations for Title I and Title II. And as you recall, in the agreement for the sale, the certificate of indebtedness, the payoff of the 2011 bonds, those are budgeted to transfer to our debt service in general funds. So since that was part of that, the transfer to the debt service can be lower because we've incorporated that all into that $3.92 million. I know that sounds confusing. If you have questions, let me know. The building fund changed to match the final mill levy that is being projected, and the revenue added for the 2020 certificate of indebtedness. And the debt service was adjusted for the refund of the sales of the bonds to pay off that debt, and the interest payment that we will have for the $3.92 million. So those three funds were affected simply by mill levies. Those are where our mill levies go. And then because of the $3.92 million that were on the certificate of indebtedness. The remainder of the budgets are the same that were approved in July. So no changes is made. So we'll just have to do a motion to approve those revisions to general fund, building fund, and debt service, and our budgets are intact. And then also, I did not go line item by line item of the numbers. I certainly can. But you will see the resolution for the tax levy for general fund, building fund, high school, miscellaneous levy, and special assessment that I have on that document, and recommend the board to accept that to certify with the county by October 10th. Any questions?
No questions? Okay. So we're done with the hearing, correct? That's all.
Well, you want to ask.
Is there anybody that wants to speak as far as the public hearing?
Because we just provided some context.
Yep. None? Oh, is there anybody that wants to speak on behalf of the budget hearing? Is there anybody who wants to speak on the behalf of the budget hearing? None? Okay. Heidi?
I just have a sideline question. Can I ask that now?
Yeah.
The per pupil payment, the students that are in the virtual academy, I know there's a significant cost to the district, which we're gladly accept, but do we get the per pupil payment for those students?
So that's based on ADM. Those students are still enrolled as students in the district, so we will continue to collect ADM. But the point you're making is fair, that it comes at cost. So we don't recoup the cost of the program, but we do continue to have the students. I will say, though, that it isn't an even exchange, because we have families that choose to go into home education as opposed to the virtual academy. So there's a net loss. And again, we talked about being student-centric, and in terms of school funding, especially in our state funding, students really matter. And, simply in that context, I mean. But when we lose students from the education system to home education, it has a significant cost. And so, that's just something as a district that we need to be aware of as we navigate through the pandemic.
Heidi?
Last question. So if we have some families that are homeschooling and decide that they want to use the curriculum with the virtual academy, is that still available? I mean, I know that started later. Is it still time to sign up, or is it too late?
So the deadline is passed. It passed in August, just because we need to register through Arizona State University, through Prep Digital. And so that timeline has passed. We have talked to some families, and we did actually, of course, we lose some to home education. We gain some from home education into the virtual academy. I wouldn't say it's a wash, but I think for our home educated families, it was a great option if they wanted to have that curriculum provided.
And lastly, if I remember right, now if they didn't enroll this semester, it's available again? Is it a full year or half the year?
So when you make the commitment, it's a commitment to a semester at a minimum. They might continue on for the year, but the window to open was in August. It's closed.
Okay. Any more on the budget hearing, or do we just close that then?
Yeah, then you just move on.
Okay. Moving on, let's move back up to finance, general fund balance. That is there for your information, unless you have some questions for Sally on that. Moving to B, is there a motion to approve the monthly financial reports? Motion by Gail. Seconded by Melissa. Any discussion? Aaron?
Yeah, I just had some observations on there. I just wondered if Dr. I could just talk to him, just as far as the difference between last year and this year. I noticed that the tuition for Leah's, textbooks, and student activity supplies is down relative from last year. Is that something that you anticipate going forward, or do you see that, or Sally, are you seeing that going up relative?
Sally?
What category again? I'm sorry.
Okay, I whipped it off pretty fast there. The tuition for Leah's.
For LEA.
LEA.
I can speak to that. The LEA tuition varies every year. It depends on, our students, what their needs are. That is an inconsistent expenditure that's very, very difficult to plan for, just because it's student-based. And that could be very high one year or very low the next, but it varies from year to year.
The other one was the textbooks. That seems to be down significantly from last year relative.
And textbooks vary from year to year, and depending upon when the purchase is made and what the plan is, so that will vary again from year to year.
So there's a rotation.
It's a rotation of what we buy.
Yeah, some subjects are more expensive than others, and so we have to budget at greater amounts for certain, when it's the rotation for ELA, it just has a greater expenditure than for social studies or whatever.
And then the last one was the student activity supplies. And is that a pandemic impacted item, or is there something else there?
Student activity.
Yep, supplies.
What code number?
I don't remember the code number. It was a $322,000 budget item.
I'd have to look at may have been some stuff for the pandemic, you know, the supply, it was in the activity fund, I guess I'm not looking.
Yeah, it said student activities.
Yeah.
The percentage of spend is down significantly from what it was last year. And I was just wondering if that was a course of the pandemic that was causing that, or?
And timing, I have to, yeah. Pandemic and the timing of when invoices come in, and, yeah.
So that's one we can investigate a little bit more and look at it.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving down to letter D, is there a motion to approve the final 2021 budget? Motion by Bob, seconded by Melissa. Any discussion? And then attached there is that summary judgment, or executive summary explaining the changes there, so.
We just really need, because the other budgets have already been approved, we just need
A motion to approve that change?
the revision to the general fund, building fund, and debt service.
Okay, is that your motion, Bob? Okay. Still second it, Melissa? Okay. Any discussion on it? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Just for the sake of clarification, the other budgets didn't change from your preliminary approval, which is why you didn't act on them. You're just talking about changing from the what you already approved.
Yep. Moving to letter C, is there a motion for the approval of the 2021 resolution of tax levies? Motion by Gail. Seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Rob?
I'm just going to share, just to reiterate here, that's at 100 mils, which is unchanged for the last couple of years.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter F, is there the formula for determining tuition agreement is there for your information? Moving down to letter G, is there a motion to approve the agreement of QHS? Motion by Heidi, seconded by Bob. Discussion. Rob, you have?
Well, I was just going to share, we've talked about this for last meeting as well. We have a FCC license through the district, and we need to what's called construct that license. There is no use for it currently in the community. It was leased out in the past to DAC Central. They do not anymore have need for it, and it has been unconstructed for a number of years. It'd be my recommendation to try to lease it. If it's not leasable because it's a pretty small band, your best bet is probably to monetize it and try to sell that license. I guess the concern would be to do nothing. An unconstructed license may be removed, and you might not have it anymore, and of course would have no value. It would seem to make the most sense to try to lease. If we could give advice to QHS or give the guidance to QHS, approve this and give them the guidance that we'd prefer to lease it. I think long-term, that makes the most sense for the district. You're gaining more funds long-term, but accept the likely outcome that you're going to need to sell it. Or you can just do nothing. I don't advise that because you would get nothing in return, but that's your other option.
Melissa and then Bob.
Just curious, if we're hanging on to that license, are there any annual fees that go with that at all? And then in the contract, I noticed that the fees, it's 10% if it's sold or leased rather, but there is no, I just want to clarify, there is no fee other than if we were to get some money out of that. Like they don't have a flat fee or anything.
Correct. Thank you. I neglected to bring that up. So the fees are 10% if it's materialized. So if you have a realized lease, it would be 10% of those lease payments. If you monetize it, it would be 10% of that total sale. If nothing happens, it is nothing. 10% of 0 is 0, so they would receive nothing. I think, given the fact that this has been used in almost 10 years, in the past it was used for ITV mostly. That's what that lease came from, or that's what that license, I should say, came from, and so that lease supported that, and that isn't something that we use. And, the downside of it is it's such a small bandwidth. I think some districts now that are moving away from this license are seeing, pretty significant payments. As I talked about last month, you're probably talking in the $15,000 to $25,000 range because it isn't very large, and probably not a lot of interest, but I think somebody could help us determine that.
Bob, is that the same question you had, or good? Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter H, is there a motion to approval of the ESSER grant in the amount of $3,000? Motion by Heidi, second by Bob. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into personnel, is there a motion for the approval of the Post-District Technology Communications Coordinator? Motion by Gail, second by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Oh, you had, no. Oh, good. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to letter B, is there a motion for the approval of the Post-District Technology Specialist position? Motion by Heidi, second by Melissa. Any discussion? Heidi?
The salary range for this, I know we are looking to fit that into our budget, making 2 positions out of a former CAS position, but do we feel our salary ranges for these are going to be competitive to fill them? I guess that was my question.
So in the first position, the technology specialist position, that's the full-time position. That is the recommended salary from the tech department. Mr. Armitage made that suggestion for that salary range. The communications coordinator is going to depend on experience.
Any other discussion? Hearing none? Oh, Bob?
What's the timeline, do you think, for filling these positions?
So with the technology specialist position, we will post that immediately, and we'll look to fill that immediately. We want that individual to cross-train. We can also use our education core funds that we talked about earlier. That could support a new position. So that is, that's how I would choose to fund that position. The communications coordinator, because that is the primary responsibility of Mrs. Brown, who's retiring, who precipitated all of this discussion. She'll be with us until December, and we will look closer to December for that. If we would be unable to find somebody, then we could potentially ask Mrs. Brown if she was interested, but that is not a plan that we could make. That is something that we would have to fall back to if a person weren't hired or found.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into tuition under A, is there a motion to approve the tuition agreement for a 6th grade student to attend Kensal Public High School for 2021 school year? Motion by Gail, seconded by Melissa. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to B, if I can have a motion for B, C, and D, it's a motion for a tuition agreement for a kindergarten Jamestown student, a 10th grade student, Jamestown student, an 8th and a 6th grade student to attend Montpelier Public School for the 2021 school year. Motion by Melissa. Second by Aaron. Any discussion? Hearing none, assuming roll call vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to open enrollment, is there a motion to approve an open enrollment for 2 first-grade Montpelier students to attend Jamestown Public School for the 2021 school year? Heidi? Motion by seconded by Jason. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving to number 9, it's discussion of input gathering. Aaron wanted to put this on the agenda to talk about some, oh, go ahead, Aaron. Why don't you explain what?
Yeah, so just from my perspective as a parent, spouse of a teacher, and a school board member, I guess I have several concerns with the current state of operation in our schools. I have concerns with the academic education and the extracurricular activities. I got concerns with the negative secondary and tertiary impacts, some of those things that were brought up earlier today in the meeting. And then I also have concerns with the stress and pressures on the administration and staff as well. And so I want to, I guess, encourage, I want to be able to leverage on some of the experiences from the parents, the students, teachers, and administrators with the mindset of continuous improvement and reflecting on those experiences. We should be looking at what's working well, what's not working well, and solicit recommendations from those various stakeholders in an open forum. So that was the purpose behind the request for the agenda item, and I guess I'd be prepared to make a motion to make that happen, I guess.
To have it, what's that? Is it?
So I can describe the motion. So
your motion is to have an open forum?
Yeah, so I move to invite and encourage advice and counsel from the parents, student, teachers, and administrators, and provide a forum for them to speak at a scheduled special meeting to provide input to the school board. Solicitation for this input should be actively pursued through means determined by the superintendent. Guidelines should be established and communicated by the superintendent such that personnel issues or grievances are not to be a part of this open forum.
There's a second. Any discussion? My thought is, I mean, is it better, I mean, to have an open forum? You know, there's a lot of people that are not COVID, I mean, they're COVID concerned, but there's, you have the people that are not concerned at all, and then you have the people that are really concerned. To allow an open forum to come in, I mean, those people would be hesitant to come to an open forum versus having like, I know we have, is it called doodle survey that we've had at the beginning of the school year, trying to get a cross-section of all the people. And my opinion is that I would think a survey like that would be more apt to get information versus having an open forum, because an open forum, you're just going to have, you might have a stronger sense of a certain group of people coming out versus, I mean, the silent people or the people that are more concerned about the COVID than not. No, Melissa?
I agree that there is a group of people that would maybe be uncomfortable coming in because of COVID reasons, but I would say maybe do both, because I know that I have heard from people in the past that when that survey is done, they did not feel that their voice was expressed. Because when they listen to the results and they're like, but that's not what I said. They didn't feel that everything came out in the survey as far as being given to the board. So I would suggest that we would have both available, and maybe even be able to do Zoom for those that didn't feel comfortable coming into the meeting.
Bob?
I think there's a couple of things we have to be aware of. There are schools across the state that are shut down because of COVID issues. There are classrooms where, in schools that are shut down because a student was positive or a parent was positive. We heard from one group tonight, but there's a lot more to it than what we heard tonight, and it's a concern. I'm sure we have teachers that are very concerned that the district is not doing enough because they might have health issues, or they might have children with health issues. We have to be responsible to everybody, you know, and the problem with the situation we're in right now, and I'm not saying this to be funny, whatever we do is wrong. That's just the way it is. And that's not a good position to be in, and I feel for administration, and I'm not happy the position the board is in, but I don't know what else we can do. And I know it's the same across, the 200 school districts or 175 school districts we have in North Dakota. They're all struggling with the exact same thing. And I have grandchildren and children that are in 2 public schools in this state, and I know, and they're two different sizes, and they're struggling with the same stuff we are. I'm not opposed to having a forum. I think it's good for people to come in and talk. I think it was good tonight. I appreciated the people that came in. It was good to hear about it. And I'll tell you what, my heart breaks for the kids. It really does. And that goes back all the way to last spring when kids came off the basketball floor in the middle of a tournament and told, "You're done." That had to be heartbreaking. I can't imagine a situation worse than that. I agree completely that the hybrid, that the I don't want to say homeschooling, that's not the correct term. The home education, the distance learning is not as good as face-to-face. I get that, but I don't know what the alternatives are. I don't know. And I've been in education for a long time, and I've never seen anything like this. And I just don't know what to do. I keep saying the only thing we can compare it to is the Spanish flu or polio. Those 2 things, and none of us were around then, so we don't know. I wish I had some good advice to give. I think, though, what we have to remember is if we have an open forum, many times people that come have a strong point of view, and sometimes when you listen to just one perspective, you forget that there's a lot more to it than just what you hear. So yes, I think we should have the forum, we should listen, but we have to do what we think is best based on science. And I do get a little bit concerned when I hear people talk about, well, there's not that many people that have died. How many is not too many? I really don't like that discussion. And there was one estimate I heard about the number of teachers that have died across the country or that will die. That's not anything that we can laugh at. There are children that are dying from COVID. How many is not too many? And that's the position that we are in and that administration is in, and we have to take that seriously. And the other side of that is what's going to happen to the future of our country if we produce a generation of kids that are undereducated. That's the flip side. And God only knows what the answer to that thing is, but I hope we can come through with it.
Jason, then Gail.
And maybe a question for Mr. Roberts is this mostly COVID-driven, or is it bigger picture in general driven, the concept of, an input gathering?
I guess my primary motivation is that, we've done this, it's been about a month. We did the initial surveys, and I know there's a lot of experiences that we can leverage on where we're at today. And I want to be able to give a voice to the community to come in and tell us, are we doing it right? Are we doing it wrong? And just to give them that venue to give us their thoughts on it. Because I have my own thoughts, I have my own biases, but I want to make sure that we give the opportunity to other folks as well to come in and explain that.
What's that, Greg?
Greg has his hand raised.
Oh, Greg?
I see it.
You want to put your mic on? Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut in front of anybody, but I think it's all of the above. I think we need to hear from the community I think we need to hear from the students, and I think we need to try to do it in a way that's going to provide the safest atmosphere as possible. So I think, a survey, maybe a survey from the students, a survey from the parents, and if some are willing to have a controlled, open forum, which would have to be controlled. We don't want to create something with an open forum that negatively affects our school district. So we have to be careful about that. But I think we should look at various ways to gather more information, because obviously there are some concerns that we need to consider as a board. So I'm open to having a survey. I'm open to a open Zoom meeting where people can voice their concerns professionally, and I'm open to an open forum that's controlled to the point that it would not add to the concerns that we have with our current condition. Thank you.
Gail? Oh, your mic's not on.
It didn't stay on. There, is it? Am I good?
Yep.
I'd like to concur with a lot of what Bob said. I think this is really an unprecedented time. I'm also going to speak as a mom. My son has COVID. He's a teacher. He doesn't teach for our district, but he's very sick. I've had to talk to him. I can't go see him. He's been in the emergency room twice. He's ran a high fever. He's very dedicated to his profession, and it's been hell. I would hate to wish that on any other teacher, and it's random. He's done everything he could. He's done it right. You don't want to be in my position. He's young, he's 27, he's by himself, and he's fighting this by himself because he has to. He said it's as sick as he's ever felt. He's battled diabetes. He has had leg sores with that. He's overcome his diabetes, and this is the worst fight he's had, and he's young and he's healthy, and he exercises every day. And I don't want that to be any parent in this district. I don't want that to be any teacher in this district. And I don't blame anyone there, but the precautions we're taking are for a reason. You don't want to be me. I haven't slept. I'm talking him through things. He doesn't know how he's going to pay for some of these things. He's a young teacher. He barely makes $40,000 a year. You don't want to be in that thing. None of us do. And I don't think any of this is perfect. I was an educator for years. I think the best way is when I'm with them every day and I'm hugging them and I'm caring for them and I'm doing all that. But we know ourselves in Jamestown, our numbers have went up and down. We don't know where we'll be. We have to look at the science, and there may be sacrifices. But I don't want it to be the life of one of our teachers, the life of one of our students, that they can't recover from. They can't. I mean, if I could have a magic wand, I want this gone more than anyone. If I could, it's hell. I hate wearing a mask. It's not me. But I'm doing it. I hate not being able to see my mom the way I used to. But I also would hate the alternatives. We're trying to get creative, and I think maybe if we have this forum, it could be too to generate what can we do to make these experiences safe and meaningful for students. I mean, we have to get creative, and we have to follow the science. I apologize because I've checked my phone a lot, but I've kind of seen what's happening and where we're at. So I don't know. I agree with Bob. In all of this, losing one student will be too many. Losing one teacher will be too many. And, you know, I think today we're turning a curve. My son's, I think, going to be okay. But we still don't know. It can change day to day, hour to hour. I don't know. And it is unlike anything we've seen. You know, my mom cared for polio people as a nurse. My grandpa's mother died when he was 5 in the 1918 flu pandemic. All of those events defined them and who they are. They were hard. They were hard then, and they're hard now. So I think we should have that public input, but also I don't want it to become a super spreader event. That would be the ultimate irony. We have to do it in a way that is still safe. And we also have to find a way too, because if you're a person who's more afraid because maybe of what happened to me and my son, I might not come. I might be a little emotionally raw to deal with something like that. So we have to have it in a way that we can have everyone contribute fairly to. Whether it's those who are afraid on Zoom, and maybe get data ahead of time for it. Survey ahead of it, so we have that whole pool of information. I never dreamt I'd be in the position I was this last weekend. None of us do. None of us do. So whatever we do, like I said, we have to get all opinions in and still proceed. Because we're right, we can't get it wrong. If a beloved teacher has something, God forbid, happen, we'll be held responsible for that. We have to make just the best decisions that we can. But, and I also think too, until it's happened to you, it's not personal. It isn't. It's something I saw on the news or social media or this or that. But it's different when you're on the other end of it. So that's my 2 cents. And thank you for listening, and I'm sorry if I got a little emotional.
Nope, you're good.
But I didn't cry.
No.
I did not.
Heidi?
Thank you, President Hout. I think we also want to make sure that we have a group of administration, staff, a school board member that sat on this committee that was in August to kind of go through the survey data and stuff. And I want to just make sure that we're real appreciative of their time to coming in before school started and planning all that, because I think that it's really easy for us to sit here and go, well, I think we should do this, or I think we should do that, when this group really rolled up their sleeves and really dug in. And so I don't want to forget about that, and I don't want to sound, for us to seem like we don't appreciate it, because I think everyone around this table does appreciate the work of that group. And then that group also does meet twice a month. I'm not opposed to gathering more data. I think a survey would be fine. I think I would be opposed to a public open forum, because I think if we're going to have a public open forum, we can't limit. I wouldn't want to. Who are you going to decide you're going to let in or not let in? Because we still have governor's guidelines to follow for spaces, and so, that to me would be having a public forum and then limiting who can come in doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I think that would be irresponsible of us. So if the people have some question answers over, perhaps over Zoom, maybe we could do it over, that would seem acceptable. But I think too, we could gather input, and we have administrators in each building that talk to their teachers every day. They're gathering input. I don't want the public to feel like there's not been any input that's been taken. Parents talk to teachers, parents talk to administrators. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to gather information, and I don't know that if we want to do this, I'm in favor of doing it, but I don't know that the public open, like an open, in-person open meeting would be, to me, that's not acceptable, because I don't want to limit people if they want their voice heard. And certainly, we know that there are people that might want to give their input that probably are not able to be in that type of a setting. So
I would echo that. I mean, a survey where, we're looking for the information. We don't have to have person to get that information. My thinking would be a survey, because I agree with Heidi that you have the groups that are going to come out to the open forum, but then you have people that are feeling unsafe to go there, and their opinion means just as much as somebody that's going to be coming there. So, Rob, you had a comment?
Well, I think we're all at pandemic fatigue. Everybody is. Students are, parents are, our teachers are, our board You are. I can tell you administrators are. And we have to look at a lot of really challenging solutions, none of which we like. And we have to pick the best ones of the solutions that we don't really like. Everybody here, every board member, every teacher, every administrator wants to be back face-to-face. Everybody does. There isn't anybody in our district, community, parents, students, teachers, support staff, nobody wants to limit attendance to activities. Nobody wants to put limitations or changes in front of anybody. We would love to be back doing everything we did a year ago today. So that's not really the question. The question isn't even how did we get here? We know how we got here. We had a stakeholder group and we said, what's the best plan? And we got information from everybody and said, well, what's the best plan? And it's not even a question of are we assessing it regularly. I meet with the team every 2 weeks. We look at numbers and what we're doing right now. We look at the numbers in our county. We look at cases in our district. In close contact, which we aren't talking a whole lot about, but that actually takes out a greater number in quarantine that impacts schools. That's what's happening in districts like Dickinson, in community, area schools that have had to go into a full shutdown. It's a lot of times it's the impact of close contact. So it's not a question of are we assessing it regularly. I think it's a question of input, of people feeling heard. I think that's the question. So I guess just perhaps a suggestion would be, can you marry these ideas together? Can you have, say, I'm just trying to piece together different things that people have shared. I mean, would it be reasonable to say, let's get in this room, maybe another room, you get tables together, you have a couple of board members, maybe an administrator sitting at that, maybe somebody that served on our planning committee, and people sit down and people can just come in and sit down and come to the table that they feel the most comfortable coming to. Because some people might not feel comfortable speaking before a board in the public forum. Okay, that's also not a limiting factor you want to put into place. But they might feel comfortable sitting down at a large table with 3 people and saying, this is what I see. This is what I see that went really well. This is what I see as a challenge. And here's some potential solutions that I see. That makes sense to me. That's a small, what I do get a little bit concerned about, and Roger touched on this, is that generally speaking in public formats, you get very polarized, strong opinions, one side or the other. I get a little bit concerned about that, but there's some workarounds there too. You could do a little bit of both. You could say, I want to invite some people that represent different stakeholder groups. You want to make sure that nobody's left out. You can invite some people and you can have an open forum. That way you hear from people on all sides of the issue. I'm just thinking you walk into this room, you see one table, I'm sitting with Aaron and Bob. And if you feel the most comfortable talking to Aaron, Bob, and me, you come and you sit down. And the next table, Melissa, Adam, and Gail are sitting at a table. If you feel most comfortable talking to them, you go and you sit down and you talk to them. And when this open session is over, you take all of that data that you gathered, that anecdotal, hey, what do you think, data, and we bring it into a board retreat and we talk about it. You say, boy, at my table, we were really talking about concerns about the virtual academy. People were concerned about X, Y, and Z. These were some solutions. And people were really happy with this. People were really happy with the work that our teachers were doing. They still had concerns about X, Y, and Z, but these were, this is what, as a general, this is what they thought. And then the next group might share, well, this is what we saw. This is what we heard. Well, that was consistent or that wasn't consistent. Because I'll tell you, you're going to hear different perspectives. I hear it every day. I'll talk to somebody that says, what are you doing? You aren't doing enough. This is unsafe. I hang up the phone, I can talk to somebody else and say, what are you doing? You're doing too much. This is crazy. And then I can get stopped by somebody at track, and they'll tell me, thanks for all you do. There's no great answer here. We appreciate everything the school is doing. You're going to get somebody in every one of those categories. And if we don't, then we're limiting too much, because I tell you, they're out there. And that's my only concern with having an open forum. You're going to hear really polarized, strong opinions on one side or the other, and I think we'll miss the mark on what the moral middle ground says. That's just, but that's one solution that I would offer up.
Melissa?
All right, that's me.
I guess too, I would just encourage people to email and write letters. I know that we have received some letters from a couple of students, and we get those. I mean, direct them to the board, and they will get passed on to us. So if you aren't comfortable coming to the forum, or you feel that your voice isn't heard through please send us emails, write us letters, and we will read them. So just want to encourage people to do that as well.
Heidi?
I think that probably might generate more discussion back and forth if it's an open forum that's just people speaking and then stepping away from the mic. But this would generate probably more discussion, which I think is what we're looking for, and more of an environment like that. I also would like a table, if we move this route, I would like a table that there's a Zoom available also, so that people can Zoom in. And so I think that, and it would also involve the administrators that are on the front lines there, and any other staff that might be interested. I also want to make sure that staff and teachers have time for some input as well, because I think again, there's probably a variety of input there. And I do want to assure people that the board listens to everybody and we hear everybody. If a decision isn't made going one way or another, doesn't mean that they're not heard and their concerns aren't valid. And I think anyone who has kids right now, or older adults, or any of those populations, this is just a difficult time. I have 3 children. This is not easy. It's not easy as a parent. There's a lot to navigate as a parent. It's not just school and education. There's a lot to navigate right now as a parent, and it's a change. I had a senior last year that it wasn't something that we knew was coming. It was very abrupt, and the year was done. Prom, graduation wasn't as we had hoped. Right up to that week, we could only have, according to the governor's guidelines, 10 people at a graduation party. That's not a typical graduation party. I have 46 at Christmas. So with my large family, but it's not easy right now, and it's gone on for a long time, and it becomes very emotional and becomes very wearing, particularly on our younger people and our older people in the community.
Rob, then Bob.
Well, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Roberts. This is his agenda item, but my understanding of the desire is to have an open forum that includes teachers, not sitting at the table, but a place that they can go and share. And so my thought is you would have 4 or 5 tables set up throughout this room, 2 board members and administrator sitting at the table. Administrator, I think, is important to understand the context of what happens in his or her building, at his or her level. I think having that administrator perspective at that table is really important because they're working at that level of implementation. That's really important. They might have some context to why certain things happen, and this could be a little bit more of a dialogue. But again, I just envision somebody being able to walk in saying, this is the table I feel the most comfortable sharing with. And like I said, then a debrief the next week, something like that, I think could be important.
Bob, then Gail.
I think we've had a good discussion here, and it's probably the most prudent thing to do is to pass the motion. And I think Dr. Leck has a lot of feedback from the board on how the forum should be organized. So I think, like I said, we can pass the motion and just leave it up to Dr. Leck to organize how it should be.
Gail?
Say that too, but maybe think out of the box with this size of room. Maybe we have a place in the district that would allow us to do it safer and spread people out more. Sure. And it seems like with what this topic is, it could draw more people than we could probably safely accommodate, or just think outside of the box on how we allow it. So so it stays a safe event and doesn't put anyone at risk, or have people going in and out of a group, to spread. If one person comes and is positive, they could potentially spread it to every table. And we just would want to maybe think, we have a lot of facilities that are a lot bigger than this. It's just a thought I had. So, and thanks.
I think that, the open forum, we've had in the past for inviting public in to get information on our referendums and so on. Those amount of people that come out might be different. It might be different, being it's a COVID thing and there's a lot of emotions running high. But those forums, were not the people that came out for them was very low, in my opinion. I've been on the board now 9 years, I think it is, and one of my pushes was to get people involved in the school system, to get their opinion and stuff. And you have these forums, and in a clean year, I'll say, they don't come out for that. So now we have a COVID situation, and we're asking people to come out into a school system. And my opinion, I think that the data is going to be skewed one way, and we're not going to hear from the silent. So that's just my opinion. Aaron?
Yeah, I guess I'm not opposed to, having a survey in combination with this, or, making sure that people are aware that, hey, email is there. Use that. We read it. I read every single one, and I appreciate that input. So, there's that venue as well. But I do think we need to give a venue for people to have some level of dialogue and a verbal interaction face-to-face to express their concerns. And I think we need to give them that voice. It's right in line with the school board handbook guidelines, and I think we need to accommodate that as best as we can.
Any other discussion? Heidi? Oh, Greg? Go ahead.
I agree with a lot that was said here tonight, but I would also say, there's a reason why I'm not there tonight. And I am trying to minimize my community action because I have a daughter that's dealing with some serious things that I can't afford to have myself or my wife come down with anything. So I would not go to an open forum, but I certainly would be willing to participate in a survey. I certainly would be willing to participate in a Zoom meeting. And we have other people in the community that have a word to say that we need to hear, whether it's through email or other those things. So I don't think we should try to limit it to one forum. I think if we want to hear what the people say, and I'm not putting down the committee that has done hard work. Absolutely. I appreciate that. But we have to listen. We were elected by the community, okay? We need to listen to what the community is saying, and we need to mix that in with what the science is saying, with what our experts are saying, and come up with a good solution. That's my only point. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Heidi?
Just, I know we probably don't have this all completely planned out, but would we do this over a few nights? Or, I mean, I'm just thinking, you know, we're going to want to, I'm just not sure, like, if one night, if, you know, we have to limit attendance based on our capacity and those kinds of things.
I guess I would envision doing it in one night. Usually, you know, forums like this do occur that way. I think if you do a mixture of invite and open session, you're going to get a pretty good cross-section of folks, and they're going to be able to tell you what's going well, what isn't going well, and you know, some solutions. If you give a period of time to debrief, you know, to collect those thoughts, if you're sitting, you know, again, Roger, Aaron, and I are sitting and we're having these conversations throughout this period of time, and we go home and decompress and think about what we heard, and then we come back into a board retreat and report and say, well, this is what we think, you know. And I can assume, you know, what I think I'm going to hear, and you can assume what you think you're going to hear, but until you get to that point, you don't really know. But I think it's an easy exercise for the district to accommodate. And I agree. I like the idea of the Zoom, have a table where, you know, Greg, obviously, if he's, you know, concerned about that, and he could be in that group, another administrator could be online, and they could go that route. You could have 4 tables of 2 board members, of the remaining board members with an administrator at each of those tables. I'm happy to sit at one of those tables, and you know, we can kind of outline a process. If that's agreeable, I'm happy to try to facilitate that. You know, from a timing standpoint, we aren't sitting on our thumbs around here. We do have a lot going on, and so we would try to look to plan that you know, in a time period that works. You know, the one thing I would say, you know, I know the boards, you've heard me say this in the community, those that are here and those that are watching, and just the reminder that our intention from this very beginning is we're starting at a place. You know, I know that when we get in and we're here and it's been a couple of weeks, we feel like this is where we're ending. This is where we start. Our intention is to get back, and we have to do these things. You know, the intention of the committee was to do these things to mitigate so we could get back. And I know when you get stuck in it and you get into that malaise of this is what we do, it's really, really hard to separate that and say, but eventually we're going to, you know, our intention is to come back. We get stuck into this is the way it's going to be. And it isn't the way it's going to be. It's the way it is right now. And I just want to reinforce to those that are watching that, you know, and those that are in the audience too, that our intention is to get back. We're just trying to do it in the right way and trying to honor the perspectives of everybody. Those that think we aren't doing enough, some that think we're doing, you know, everybody is on that. They run in that gamut. And you heard one perspective today, you could hear a different perspective at the next meeting because they're out there. It's very polarizing. But our intention is to come back. But if we need to hear additional comments, I'm all for it. You will hear everything from you're doing a great job to you need to totally flip it on its ear. You'll hear it all.
Bob? No? Jason?
I just thought of something quick. One of the concerns tonight was homecoming. Do we anticipate any change in that, or?
Well, I wish Mr. Rolson was here. He was in that particular meeting. From my perspective, and I think Mr. Gaylor shares his perspective from what we've talked about before, we've empowered our students to make that particular decision. If the students want to have it this week, I'm all for it. If they want to postpone it to another date, I'm all for it. That to me, you know, is a student-driven decision. And if they choose to have it now with the limitations that would have to be in place to do that safely, I would have supported that. If the students come back and they say, we want to have it where it can be more traditional, and they want to postpone or delay, I'm all for that. I don't have a dog in that fight. To me, that is a student-driven call. And our student council said this is how they want to do it. We don't direct them to say, but you really need to do it this way. That, again, I can't speak for Mr. Gardner or Mr. Rolson who were involved in those particular discussions in those meetings, but I can tell you, they also don't have a dog in that fight. If it is next week, this week, if it's in the football season, if it's in the winter, that's pretty low on our list of things to deal with. It's a student-driven decision, and I would support whatever the students decided. I get that not everybody agrees on that, because just like our community, you're going to hear differences in our student body about what they should do and what they shouldn't do. All I know is a recommendation came from our student council as to what they wanted to do, knowing that if they do it this time, there's limitations. If they do it at another time, there may not be. I can respect that. I can respect what our students want to do. I could turn around tomorrow and say we're doing a homecoming court. Fantastic. If we want to delay it until the winter, fantastic. It is not an issue, in my opinion.
Heidi?
As long as we're adjusting a couple of things, you mentioned when you went through the schools that they are following the WDA set guidelines. Can you just for the public's sake, can you explain that and what you mean by that? I have a student or a student athlete, so I've been dealing with the vouchers and all that, but can you just explain how that all works?
Sure. So the WDA activities directors got together and they, using the Department of Health guidelines on public gatherings, said, how can we make this work? Of course, we're going to have more than 500 people interested in attending an event. How can we manage that and be fair to everybody? And so ultimately what that group decided was that what's most fair is if it's a voucher system. Basically, a voucher gives you the opportunity to purchase a ticket. That's the way you can minimize, minimize it maybe isn't the right word, but this is how you can assure that you can follow those guidelines. Because you have X amount of vouchers. You don't get in without a voucher. So it's a ticket to get a ticket. So many go to the home crowd, or the home school. So many go to the visiting school. Schools do it differently, and it depends on activities. When you have 80 kids playing football, that's a lot different than a dozen playing tennis. It's not a big issue in tennis. It's a big issue when you have 80 families in football. And so you have to follow those, we follow those guidelines. The schools in the WDA that agreed that that's how they'll operate, so they're consistent. Now the EDC operates a little bit differently, but it's really a very similar idea. Everything is grounded on the North Dakota Department of Health's guidelines for large gatherings of 500. So you get a voucher, you can buy a ticket. The last thing we want to do is limit the amount of people that can watch their grandkids play football. That's not high on our list of things to do, but it is something that we have to do because those are the guidelines that are in front of us. We don't have to like the guidelines to be able to respect that they exist.
Heidi?
And it's 500, can you describe who makes up that 500? Is it just fans, or is it?
Well, it depends on the activity. I know for some, they give them to the athletes and I should say, not athletes, the participants. The participants can disseminate them. Mr. Gaylor, do you know of any different mechanism for that? That's pretty much, I think it depends on the activity. Yep. Yeah, and this,
Varies district by district. Some
yeah.
are all virtual, no
Yep.
spectators, and some are 2 vouchers for
Yeah.
home and 2 for away, and some are 4 for home and 2 for away.
Yeah.
It varies district to district.
And this includes the participants. We're talking 500, but this includes the participants. Again, for football, that's a larger number than it is for tennis. So you have to accommodate coaches, referees, those are all in that number.
Any more discussion on the motion? Let's stick to that, okay? Any more discussion on the motion? So your motion, Aaron, is to have a open forum, and as we talked tonight, I mean, like Rob said, I mean, to have tables and stuff, that would be suffice your open forum? And then have a survey additional to that for people who don't want to come out, that their voice can be heard too? And a Zoom one, okay. So there's a motion and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, Sally?
Roger Hout,
Yes.
Heidi Larson. Jason Rohr.
Yes.
Gail Nelson. Robert Toso.
Yes.
Aaron Roberts.
Yes.
Greg Allen.
Yes.
Melissa Gleason. Diane Hansen. Oh, absent. Motion passes 8-0. Diane
Okay.
Hansen absent.
Moving on, items for future agenda. If there's something come up, just let Rob and myself know, and we'll get on there. We have meetings to be scheduled. We have a new school board orientation Monday. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I just have one item for future agenda. If we could just take a look at the enrollment, the open enrollment. I'd just like to look at our statistics between last year and this year with the amount of students that are going into the open enrollment to other schools and into our school.
Okay. Any other items for future agenda? Just let us know. We have a new school board orientation Monday, October 5th at 4 p.m. here in the district conference room. Our next school board meeting is Monday, October 5th at 5:15 here in the Thompson Community Room. Health Insurance Committee meeting is October 12th, Monday at 3:45. And just a reminder to right-click on the superintendent's evaluation to evaluate that, and to right-click on our adjournment to assess our meeting. No further business, meeting's adjourned.